for the second time. On this occasion, they have an incredible majority, 67 out of 70 seats. As a result, there are enormous expectations, which the Chief Minister has understandably said are scary. So the key question tonight before the new government takes power is, can it deliver on its promises, or has it promised more than it can deliver? Over the next 1 hour, those are the two key questions we shall seek to address. And now joining me for this special discussion on the Aam Aadmi Party's manifesto and whether it can deliver its promises is Aam Aadmi Party MLA and the grandson of former Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri, Adarsh Shastri, former Cabinet Secretary TSR Subramaniam, former Chief Secretary of Delhi Shailaja Chandra, the head of the Centre for Public Affairs and Critical Theory at Shiv Nadar University, Dipankar Gupta, and the former editor of The Hindu, Siddharth Vardarajan. Mr. Chandra, there are many promises in that 42-page, 70-point manifesto, which I believe the Aam Aadmi Party simply cannot deliver on unless Mr. Modi A, agrees with them, and B, goes on to actually actively take steps to help them. I'm talking about things like statehood for Delhi, the new Lokayukt Act, the Swaraj Bill, and very possibly also their commitment to restructure DDA and MCD. Am I right in saying that here the key issue is that the Delhi Assembly cannot make laws which are repugnant to a law already made by the National Parliament?
You're right.
And clearly the Lokpal Bill and the Swaraj Bill fall into that category, whereas statehood for Delhi requires a constitutional amendment which even Mr. Modi can't guarantee.
That's true. That's true.
How serious a problem is that?
You know, if you really look at day-to-day working, which is not in their manifesto, which is looking after your OPDs, looking after the ration shops, looking after the everyday things that go on, the congestion, the pollution, all those things, you can address them without any laws. It is part of general administration. You can look into the schooling and the teaching and the quality of care that is being given to so many other social welfare.
But as far as these issues like statehood, Lokpal and Swaraj Bill, how serious is this problem?
It is serious if they are serious. If they really want to do it, it is not going to happen without this matter going to the central government, and immediately the repugnancy clause would slip in. If that happens, then you have two options: to take it back, in which case it's just a paper order, a paper law which you tried to make. You had good intentions, but it didn't take you anywhere. Alternately, you can start agitating. These are the only two options open to you.
But you said a very important thing. You're saying this problem that I've pointed out is a very serious problem, assuming Aam Aadmi is serious about statehood,
yes,
about a new Lokayukt Act, about Swaraj bills. If they're not serious, it's not a problem. But if they are serious, this virtually ensures they can't do it.
They can't do it. But what they can do, and which is what I would have liked...
Let's come to what they can do, which are other subjects in a moment's time. I want to first focus on this, because these are actually, as you'll have noticed, Mr. Subramaniam, points 1, 2, 3 of their actual manifesto. Yeah. So in terms of location, one assumes they're very serious. Let's take these up one by one. First, I'll put to you statehood for Delhi. It isn't part of the BJP's Vision Manifesto. What are the chances in your eyes that Mr. Modi will accept this demand? He was very non-committal when Arvind Kejriwal met him yesterday.
We only had a second-hand report on that. We're not sure exactly.
But Manish Sisodia saying it.
But second, therefore, we don't know exactly what transpired at that meeting. I think there are two sides to this. One is whether or not it will be seriously pressed by the new government, Delhi government.
You also share her doubts.
I'm raising the issues here. Whether or not, number one. Number two, whether it will be taken seriously by the government of India and they will engage with them, either agree or disagree strongly. The third aspect is whether it is desirable. I remember that the BJP manifesto earlier had talked about full statehood, from partial statehood in 91 to move to full statehood. There are very serious issues here on full statehood. I think the entire country will want to look at this, because Delhi is the national territory. Delhi belongs to the whole people of India, and all of India owns Delhi, not just the citizens of Delhi state. So, therefore, the first decision that the government of India has to take is, should they go along with it or not along with it? And there are very, very substantive reasons why they should not.
So you're saying to me, as a former cabinet secretary, that there are very good reasons, very substantive reasons why this is not desirable.
Not at all desirable, because of our international obligations, because of the VIP movement of the national outside of the state's ambit. Number 3, freedom of movement and freedom of activity of the Government of India personnel here. Therefore, nearly everywhere in the world, the capital is national territory. It belongs to the people of the country, not of a state.
Dipankar Gupta, one problem with granting statehood to Delhi, which Mr. Modi will have to confront, is that if he does, he would lose control over the police and secondly over law and order. And that control would pass into the hands of Arvind Kejriwal, the Chief Minister. Now, that would, in theory, permit Arvind Kejriwal to allow dharnas outside the houses of cabinet ministers in Delhi, to allow vendors to block the pavements on the streets where those ministers live, and the ministers would be helpless. They couldn't do anything about it. Given that sort of risk, do you think Mr. Modi will concede this demand?
I've just heard what your panelists have said, and I think there's some merit in it, but there's one point I'd like them to consider, and that is this, that I don't think Modi will lose too many points, if he, politically that is, if he were to grant statehood to Delhi, because it would show him as a magnanimous person and the rest of it. The second is that if Delhi doesn't get statehood and things go wrong for Kejriwal, these will constitute something like deniability clause. I wanted to do it, but I couldn't do it. It provided him with a ready-made excuse. So if other things being equal, I would think that it is not really bad political tactic to grant statehood in order to win the strategical war with the Aam and also shore up BJP's credibility nationwide.
What you're basically saying, aren't you, is that Mr. Modi doesn't lose anything by granting this. Actually, he would gain because he'd look magnanimous. And secondly, you're also saying that Arvind Kejriwal would actually gain if Mr. Modi said no, because then Arvind Kejriwal could say, I did the best I could. It was the central government that obstructed me. In other words, you're saying heads or tails, Kejriwal wins on this one. Isn't that right, Dipankar Gupta?
Yes, that's what I think is the case.
But very quickly, before I go to Siddharth Varadarajan, I want to come back to that question I put to Dipankar Gupta. There are certain risks of handing over control of police to Arvind Kejriwal. Ministers' houses can then have dharnas outside them without the government being able to do anything, the central government that is. And vendors could be given permission to set up on the pavements outside those houses, and again the ministers could do nothing. Do you think Mr. Modi will take that risk by handing over police and law and order to Arvind Kejriwal?
I think he will, I mean, if he has to take a decision on this, he would look at the constitutional position. It is a union territory. By giving it statehood, you are going to not just lose control in terms of what looks like vendors coming on streets, but you will then not be able to administer the development of the capital city. You would not be able to do many things like bring external resources. Metro has come with external resources. In other words, you're giving me 3 very good reasons why Mr. Modi will actually say no. And unlike Dipankar Gupta's argument, you're saying if Mr. Modi says no, logic and rationality may be on Mr. Modi's side. This is not an emotional issue or an emotive. It may be for the public of Delhi, but one has to look at the development of Delhi. Delhi has to have orderly growth. Therefore, I mean, if you have powers of superintendence and supervision by the center and delegate a whole lot of powers, which I will come to if you let me, I think that is a great compromise and that is enough for administering Delhi. Very quickly on the political point, before I come back to some of the details and put them to you, Siddharth Varadarajan, what's your sense and what's your feeling? Mr. Modi, will he take the risk of losing control of police and law and order and hand it over to Arvind Kejriwal, someone who not only is an arch opponent in political terms, but a person who up till now has had a reputation of being a bit of an anarchist, even if he's now showing signs of reform?
Look, I think I can't imagine what the risk is, and I think that many of the arguments being made against statehood for Delhi are rather overblown. Delhi has been effectively ruled by the central government for most of its life since independence. And who can argue, who can claim that Delhi's growth has been orderly? I mean, just look at the state of the city. Look at the state of public amenities here. If this is what the central government has done through its control over the levers of power here, then maybe it's time for a change. And as for the police, why should the police coming under an elected state government?
Can I interrupt? It's not whether it's time for a change that I'm asking you. You may well be right in saying that a change is needed. I'm asking actually whether Mr. Modi will want to take the risk of handing over police and law and order to Arvind Kejriwal, a man he may well consider an anarchist.
I wouldn't use the word risk here. There is no risk involved, but he will not want to, he will not do anything which is going to weaken his own authority and power. So I don't think there's any risk or danger involved in giving statehood to Delhi and asking, putting the police under their control. I mean, if the London Metropolitan Police can function under an elected mayor, and there is no risk of policemen turning up and arresting ministers, why should this be the case in Delhi? It's all scaremongering. Okay. And even the Swaraj bill and the Jan Lokpal bill, why should you assume that these are repugnant to central laws? I mean, the Swaraj bill is about devolving power.
Just a moment. We'll come to the Swaraj bill and the Lokpal bill in a moment's time, because actually there are reasons from the Economic Times today that make it clear that at least the Lokpal bill is repugnant because it goes beyond the government bill published by Parliament 2 years ago. So let's leave that for a moment's time. What you're basically saying is Mr. Modi can take the risk if he wants, but he's unlikely to do so because he won't want to weaken and dilute his power. Let's come at that point, Mr. Subramaniam, to in fact the Jan Lokpal bill, because that's another...
No, I would like to go back
very quickly.
I think this discussion is not taking into account the crux of the issue. The issue in this discussion is not Delhi, it is not Modi. It is what is the national interest. We had the example of London. Scotland Yard is the government of England, it's not with mayor. And you look at DC, you look at Abuja, you look at Beijing, you look at Berlin, you look nearly everywhere else. Please. So the issue here is, those are developed countries. In Indian conditions, if the Chief Minister of the day and the Prime Minister of the day are in different poles, we could have not these 3 examples, we could have 50 examples of confrontation where Government of India can come to a halt. Issue is not Delhi's development.
You made your point very clearly.
And on Delhi...
I want to move on. I don't want to get stuck on this point. You've made your point very clearly that it's not, in your opinion, in the national interest.
And therefore, it's not Modi or Kejriwal, it is the country.
Let's come to a second issue, Deepankar Gupta, where Arvind Kejriwal wants to do something which clearly he cannot do unless Mr. Modi accepts and agrees, and that's the Jan Lokpal bill. Last time, Arvind Kejriwal resigned because he couldn't even introduce the bill in the assembly. This time, with his enormous majority, that won't be a problem. But even if the bill is passed by the Delhi assembly, it will not become law unless the centre gives a nod of acceptance. And the problem is, if the bill that Arvind Kejriwal passes conflicts with or clashes or goes beyond what Parliament did 2 years ago, Mr. Modi can easily say no. And today's Economic Times has 3 specific areas where Arvind Kejriwal's proposed Lokayukt Act is repugnant to the bill passed by Parliament. Now, what's your hunch there? On that issue of Lokpal, what do you think Mr. Modi will do? Accept what Arvind Kejriwal does and let it go beyond what Parliament legislated? Or say, no, I'm sorry, you have to dilute your bill?
No, I think in the case of the Lokayukt bill, it will be a problem for Mr. Modi to accept what Mr. Kejriwal wants. And this is way beyond the problems we discussed earlier about giving Delhi statehood or not. I think this is a much more difficult problem, and both of them will stare at each other eye to eye, and nobody will like to blink. And I think that this will be a festering sore that lasts for a long time, but it will not necessarily bring down the government, either the centre or the state. It will be a continuous issue. It will go on and on over several governments. The BJP can only dig its heels in, and so can the Aam Aadmi Party. But in terms of real politics, as was mentioned earlier by Shailaja, I think, the AAP has its work cut out for it. It has to attend to local level issues and must keep the pot boiling as far as Lokayut is concerned. Okay. And here again, as I told you earlier, Lokayut and Delhi statehood are like the deniability clauses built into Aam Aadmi Party's manifesto.
You know, another, and I don't know whether this is a deliberate deniability clause, as you've just heard Deepankar Gupta claim it, but another area where something that Aam is committed to could end up being repugnant to a law passed by Parliament is the whole concept of a Swaraj bill and Mohalla Sabhas. You, in an article that you wrote for the Indian Express just a couple of days ago, pointed out that this conflicts with the Municipal Corporation Act of 1957, which clearly means, does it not, that you cannot set up Mohalla Sabhas and you cannot give them power or funds unless you first amend the MCD Act. Yes. And that lies with Mr. Modi, not with Arvind Kejriwal. So once again, The veto is in Mr. Modi's hands, no matter how much of a mandate Arvind Kejriwal believes he has behind
Yes,
it.
yes, on many counts, because the MCD Act also shows exactly how the councillors are to be elected. You'll have to do away with that or keep the councillors and have another election machinery to swear in the Mohalla Sabha people who get elected. Unless they come through an election, you cannot give them public funds. So this whole idea, somewhere I heard that they wanted to invest the RWAs, the existing RWAs with this authority. You can't, they're not elected bodies. So this will come into conflict and would be a clear reason to say no.
Let me put this to you, Siddharth Varadarajan, and I'm talking at the moment simply about issues like statehood for Delhi, issues like the proposed new Lokayukta Act or the Swaraj Bill. And you could add to that the areas where Arvind Kejriwal wants to restructure MCD and DDA, both of which again come under the central government. On all these 4 or 5 areas, the most that Arvind Kejriwal and the Aam Aadmi Party government can do is to push through the assembly bills that they want. But those bills will not become law because in one way or another, they are repugnant to something Parliament has already done earlier on, and therefore they require a nod of approval from Mr. Modi. Mr. Modi may give it, or Mr. Modi may choose not to give it. That we don't know what he'll do. But what I'm saying to you is, the veto finally lies in Mr. Modi's hands. Arvind can't deliver and ensure success. He can only promise and do his most,
yes,
but that most stops at the Delhi Assembly.
You see, there are legal cards that the centre can play, that Modi can play, if he wants to block these. But the question is, what is the political cost associated with blocking measures that are aimed at empowering the residents of Delhi? What is the political cost that Modi might have to pay to veto a measure that's aimed at streamlining measures against corruption that affect the citizens of Delhi? So I think he has to make a calculation here, and it depends on how the Aam Aadmi Party is able to present this to the wider public in Delhi. But I think this is not a fight that in political terms Mr. Modi can hope to win, especially given what we know in this election, how large corruption and some of these issues loom.
Okay.
People want to put an end to this.
We have
if
Adarsh
the Jan Lok Bill
Shastri
and the Swaraj Bill are means of doing so.
We have Adarsh Shastri, the Aam Aadmi Party newly elected MLA, with us. He's a bit late in joining the show, but welcome to the show nonetheless, Mr. Shastri. Mr. Shastri, we're talking about
Thank you, Karan.
some measures in your 42-page, 70-point manifesto which you cannot deliver if Mr. Modi A, doesn't agree with them, and B, in addition, doesn't take active steps to help you. We're talking about things like statehood for Delhi, the new Lokayukta Act, Swaraj Bill, and very possibly also your commitment to restructure DDA and MCD. Now, we've had a very substantial discussion on this, so I'm not going to repeat the discussion, but I want to ask you a simple question. How do you propose to get Mr. Modi's support for these measures? Because if he doesn't support you, these measures won't go through.
No, so I agree on that we need the support of the central government, and that is the reason why Mr. Arvind Kejriwal and Mr. Manish Sisodia went to meet the Prime Minister, went to meet the Urban Development Minister, went to meet the Home Minister to appeal to them that in the interest of the people of Delhi and in the interest of the mandate that the people of Delhi have given with the expectation of the Aam Aadmi Party, that there will be support from the Government of India, that there will be support from the BJP towards fulfilling the agenda which is based on the expectations of people. And towards that, we are hoping that there will be support from the Prime Minister and from his government.
All right, it's a hope on which your ability to succeed in these areas rests. We don't quite know whether that hope will lead to fruition or not. Time alone will tell. Let's come in the meantime, Mr. Subramaniam, to 2 other promises, which many would say are actually a good reason why Aam Aadmi got this overwhelming vote. I'm talking about the promise to reduce electricity by 50% and providing 20,000 litres of water free per household per month. First, I'll take electricity. Initially, this reduction will be by subsidy. But Aam Aadmi is confident that rationalization of bills and an audit of discoms will bring the price down. Do you share that confidence, or do you believe they're going to have to keep doing it by subsidy? Their other method, rationalization and audit, is not going to produce the result. And
the third one is result cannot be produced anyway. I mean, these results. Firstly, you started with the premise that he won on this premise, on a basis of electricity and water. That's the, in my view, this is a fundamental problem. that what is essentially a municipal election was treated as a municipal election. People's issues, water, road, etc. were done by Aam Aadmi. BJP saw it as a national election, which is a basic mistake here. I am not sure. Delhi already has 20 to 30 to 40% more per capita power than elsewhere. Delhi's population is increasing 10 to 15 to 20% every year. I'm not quite so. The electricity needs are going to continue. It is not as if it's freely available. It can be wheeled from anywhere in India overnight.
Can I interrupt? Are you therefore suggesting?
I'm not suggesting that these are not going to be easy. Number one. No, but and number two, prices. We have a temporary dip in petroleum prices, but power prices costs are not going to go down in the future.
Permit an interruption at that point. Are you therefore suggesting that if they want to reduce electricity by 50%, it will have to be by subsidy? They can't hope to do it through rationalization or audit of discounts.
Maybe a little bit, but between the two, it can't be done. One last point is...
between the two, it can be done or can't be done?
Between the two, some rationalization can be done. It may not compensate for the other factors.
So but some subsidy is essential.
Number one, history has shown in water, electricity and these areas, subsidy immediately goes to huge leakages. We have 50 to 60% transmission shortages in India as compared to norms of 4 to 5% all over the world.
So in other words, subsidy is the wrong way.
It will go immediately to the wrong channels.
Let me bring up that point of subsidy with you, Dipankar Gupta, because as you've heard from the former Cabinet Secretary, he believes a combination of rationalization of bills and audit of discoms could bring the price of electricity down somewhat, but not the full promised 50%. For that full promise to be achieved, subsidy is essential. Now, in addition, free water will be entirely paid for by subsidy. Yogendra Yadav confirmed that in an interview to me yesterday on this program. The question I want to put to you is this. In your eyes, is this sort of subsidy for electricity and water acceptable and justified because it is specifically targeted or mainly targeted at the poor? Or are there moral reasons and other grounds for saying that people should pay the full charge for utilities like water and electricity?
Well, I think water and electricity should be paid for in full by everybody, because I don't like the idea of subsidies, and I particularly don't like the idea of a targeted community, because in that case what happens, there's a lot of scope for corruption, as we've seen in other areas. But I think there's a point to be made with regard to auditing electricity supply and the electricity bills. And if that is done properly, it is quite likely that electricity rates will come down. I, however, must also say, in this connection with this problem as well as Swaraj problem, that most people who voted for AAP did not vote for the 70-point manifesto, actually. There were 2 or 3 areas they were really concerned about, and that had to do more at the municipality level, more at the level of everyday life. And if you were to spring on them Swaraj and stuff like that, I'm sure a large number of them would balk at the prospect.
Okay.
Of those who voted for AAP.
Sure.
I think AAP should go
but I want to stick for a moment to electricity and water, because otherwise our discussion will lose focus. You've been Chief Secretary of Delhi. I'm going to Mr. Chandra. I'm going to Mr. Chandra. You've been Chief Secretary of Delhi. You have a very clear idea of how these discoms function, whether auditing can actually bring the price down, whether rationalization of bills can bring the price down. What's your sense? Do you think that Arvind Kejriwal, through a proper audit and proper rationalization, can actually achieve the 50% cut?
No. He can probably make a marginal difference of 3 or 4%.
Just 3 or 4?
Yes, nothing more than that. Certainly, you can terrorize the discoms, you can terrorize the officers, and maybe the apples will start falling for a little while, but it will all add up. If you don't invest in capex, you don't invest in maintenance, you will have transmission towers toppling, you will have cables burnt, you will have transformers burnt.
Can I interrupt? Are you suggesting that any strict rationalization of bills, any sharp focus on audit will lead to savings at the cost of maintenance, savings at the cost of not just maintenance but servicing of the equipment so that towers will topple in the monsoon?
No, I didn't say that that kind of an audit or rationalization will lead to it. What I am saying is the subsidy part of it. I am saying the rationalization will be very tiny, it will be minuscule, with the result that you will again have to give subsidies to keep your word.
So one way or another, the government will be paying.
Government will be paying, and it will be terrible, because the losses were 65% in Delhi. They've been brought down to 15%. That is a great achievement.
Siddharth Varadarajan, let's come to water. Now, Delhi's water is fairly largely dependent on supplies that come from Haryana. According to the Times of India of the 11th, the Haryana Chief Minister M.L. Khattar has said that Delhi cannot rely on Haryana to fulfill its water needs. Separately, the Business Standard says that there is a 24% shortage of water in Delhi, and overall 40% is lost through faulty distribution. Now, if in those circumstances Aam Aadmi gives 20,000 litres of water free to each household each month, would that exacerbate or ameliorate Delhi's water problems?
I don't think it will make too much of difference, quite frankly, because Delhi needs to augment its supplies of water. It needs to engage in water conservation. There has to be much greater investment in the water pipeline network, which the Aam Aadmi Party manifesto says the party is committed to do over a 5 or 10 year period. I think the free water, I mean, all of us are a little bit unhappy with this idea that even people like us who have the means should be given water free, even if it's 700 litres per day. What Arvind Kejriwal has argued, and I think there's some merit to that, that the minute you consume even more than 1 litre above that free quota, then your entire consumption is billed. And this 700 litres consumption is pegged as minimum life support water, which is, you know, a human right regardless of whether somebody can pay for it or not. So I think that part is a bit of a red herring. Delhi's water problems are much more fundamental. They're a product of systematic underinvestment in city infrastructure by successive state governments and successive governments at the center. Okay. I wish the Aam Aadmi Party would have a magic wand to wish it away, but this is going to require a lot of investment, it's going to require a lot of hard work and the cooperation of the center. Quite frankly, I would say more than the Jan Lokpal and the Swaraj bill, it's in the area of electricity and water. I mean, if you look at electricity, Kejriwal wants to build a power station for Delhi, right? He wants the entire regulatory mechanism to be overhauled. I think there's some very good points in the white paper on electricity, but all of this is going to require cooperation from the central government.
Adarsh Shastri, let me put 2 quick questions to you. First of all, it's quite apparent if you listen to both what the former Cabinet Secretary Mr. Subramaniam and the former Chief Secretary Delhi Mrs. Chandra have said, that the best that you can achieve through rationalization of bills and audit of discoms in terms of reduction of electricity costs would be a 3 or 4% element, not much more. The rest, if you're going to come down to 50%, will have to be by subsidy. So when your manifesto says initially it will be by subsidy, what they are saying is right through the 5 years it will have to be preponderantly by subsidy. How do you first of all respond to that?
Well, no, I would tend to disagree with that, because we have done a lot of research at during the time of building our dialogues and during the time of building the manifesto, and very clearly the audit of the discoms will show us the huge amount of discrepancy in the form of the generation and transmission losses which have been reduced, and therefore the amount of power which is now available. So the logic is very simple. If X amount of power was